Evening, everyone. I think it's time to start CAT talk today. My name is Pipat Grajajan, a lecturer at Thammasat University in Department of History, and also a committee at Siam Society. So on behalf of the Siam Society, I am really honored to have Kate or Kathleen Reid-Smith speak today on the topic Operation Cleeves, SOE's Forgotten Wartime Strategy in Thailand. As I know, Kate recently delivered a lecture or a talk on the same topic in Penang a few weeks ago, and that area I think is like really close to the topic tonight, right? In this talk, Kate is going to present her latest book published by Pens and Sword Books in November last year. And using the classified documents previously undiscovered records and extensive original research, the book Operation Cleeves provides an intimate yet harrowing look into a most secret and turbulent operation show in mystery. Where for the first time vivid and powerful accounts of tremendous courage in the face of resilience and redemption reflect how Southern Thailand became the first casualty of Japan's war in Southeast Asia in December 1941. First of all, I would like to introduce our speaker, Kate. Kate is a military and intelligence historian focusing on combat operations in World War II Southeast Asia, based in Canberra, Australia, and having worked and traveled extensively across the region over a few decades. Her research and writing focus on uncovering, investigating, and bringing previously unknown actions and operations directly relating to the Southeast Asia wartime diaspora out from the shadows and into the historical light. One of her key goals is to address some of the many gaps in conventionally accepted historical literature, especially in how the often diverse and usually unrecognized plight surrounding regional wartime experiences have often been overlooked or subsumed beneath the historically bigger strategic picture. Operation Cleeves and its focus on Southern Thailand's experiences as it bore the initial brunt of Japan's December 1941, as South is one of them. Please welcome Kate to on the stage. If you have any question, please feel free to ask her after presentation. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you, Arajam Pibad. Okay, as I said to you before, I'm going to have to take my glasses off, so I'm not being rude. I just won't be able to read otherwise. Okay, here we are. Thank you all for coming, and it's good to see so many out here on this evening for this talk. Should I move that up or down? Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm not sure what to do with it. It's a bit too technical for me. Oh, yes, that's much better. Yes, thank you. Thank you, so much better. I really am very pleased to see you all. I'm so lovely and happy to be here. We've been trying to get this together for about over a year now. It's taken us this long, but we're here. So I'm really pleased to be able to talk to you about Operation Cleeves, and it is a covert operation that doesn't appear in the history books yet, and it will soon. But I think it's important because it is the 80th anniversary of the ending of World War II this year. And I think it's important that we do remember those that have been, lost in history, so to speak. Now, before I go into the book itself, I would like to give you a little bit of a background into the Special Operations Executive, how it came about, why it's important to Southern Thailand, and indeed how the SOE Far East and Southern Thailand's covert history actually started on the other side of the world in the aftermath of the fall of France in 1940. Now, I believe this one changes. There we go. Now, one of the biggest lessons Britain learned after Germany's rapid occupation of France in mid-1940 was that centuries-old regular warfare or conventional warfare was pretty much dead. And if you think about it, it was no longer about two large armies on a big paddock, cannons in situ, archers at the ready, firing at somebody standing over there. What had happened was Germany's strike fast and hard blitzkrieg had taken the War Office and Churchill by surprise. And now practically overnight, London was realising that warfighting was changing. And now at the same time, by the end of 1940, there were other reports coming through to London that there was a different type of warfare happening in places like Poland and Greece and Yugoslavia, and where successful smaller operations like, targeted sabotage, hit and run behind enemy lines operations, blowing up railway lines, all that kind of thing, electricity grids, destroying ammunition, store dumps, and all this kind of thing. And it was proving far more effective in disrupting the Nazi war machine than anything else. So Churchill took leave, and so did the War Office actually. But this new warfighting department just might help Britain and the Allies get ahead because they just could not match Germany's mobilisation and speed. So this new warfighting arm that Churchill fully backed and was very keen to get on board was called the Special Operations Executive, and it was focused on all these little small-time sabotage behind enemy lines activities that had been working so well in other parts of the country. Now you can see here, I call it the swarming mosquito effect, and this is actually a map from 1944. And it really was a litmus test in France, I believe, because it shows you all the red little bits on the map are places where they have blown up electricity grids and they have taken out railway lines and bridges and tunnels and all the assorted infrastructure that you associate, because in warfare, communications, transport and supply are the three main tenets that you need to have control of to defeat any enemy. And in France, you can see just within a space of 18 months how all these little mosquito swarming SOE smaller operations were really putting a dent in the Nazi war machine. But bearing that in mind, how well they were doing, and it was going well in France, and so SOE was up and running, there was another dimension about the fall of France, and it had direct implications for both Thailand and British Malaya's shared backyard. And that is because when France fell and Vichy France emerged, so did Vichy French colonies emerge. And here we had Vichy French colonial Indochina, along with a very new pro-Axis Vichy Hanoi capital. And it didn't take long for Tokyo to take advantage of a substantial change in the status quo. Remembering too that Japan was pushing their Asian for Asians mantra, and that was being very well received by some in the region. So by early 1941 we have a new pro-Hitler, pro-Axis Vichy Hanoi, and it was very much in the grip of Tokyo's influence. And you can see, and it's not to scale of course, but I know it's very crude, but I think it shows the infographic of how Japan had moved swarms and swarms of its troops, its tanks, its ships, you name it, that they just moved into French Indochina and all moved up to the French Indo-Chinese and Thai-Malay border. Now we have to remember too at this time that Thailand had declared neutrality. Nobody was at war with Japan yet, nor the Americans for that matter, which meant that none of them were subject to Britain's Trading with the Enemy Act. So if Tokyo wanted to have diplomatic relations with Bangkok or Vichy Hanoi or anyone else, no, it was fine. There was nothing, there was no international law saying no. But by now, Tokyo was getting rather emboldened. It was, up close and personal with Vichy Hanoi, very close and personal. And it was now extending its footprint into its newest best friend, which was Bangkok. Now, Bangkok was becoming pro-Hitler and pro-Axis, and that was because it had been in the hold of a fascist coup since 1932, and that had pretty much ousted the Thai royal family. They had no real role at all in any of the delegation, directions, decision-making, nothing like that. It was all in the hands of these specific politicians, policymakers in Bangkok who had undertaken the coup. Now, we have to remember too that Thailand had a bit more going for it than Vichy French Indochina. The geography of southern Thailand, for example, southern Thailand is the shortest east-west land route across the Reid-Smith. If you wanted to go from one to the other, what better way to go than there? And it was just a bit of a bonus that it happened to border the northernmost border with British Malaya. The other significant part to know is that 67% of the world's tin resources at that time were in southern Thailand alone. So Tokyo wanted Bangkok's tin, there's no two ways about that, but there was a very real problem. And that was because even though geographically the tin was in the ground in southern Thailand, it was predominantly British tin mining companies who owned and controlled the production, and they were not sharing any of it with Japan. So this is just a bit of an aside to put into perspective. We know London wanted to maintain its extensive resources, particularly access to tin, for its own war-fighting efforts. We know the Americans were stockpiling it as much as they could, and we know Japan was not having any luck. And that was a bit of a problem for Japan, because in just under a decade they've shifted from an industrial complex into one of a vast military industrial machine. And tin was on the top of their shopping list for all sorts of weapons and armaments, as you can imagine. But there was a silver lining to Japan's tin deficiencies, and this is, I thought, really apt to show this. If you see on the left there, you see that structure. This is the Ban Pru tin mine. That's its dredge. And all the white little bits, like little mountains all around, that's the detritus from the tin being pulled out of the ground. It was just refuse, nobody wanted it, and they're called tin mine tailings. So by November 1941, Japan was pretty much the only purchaser of southern Thailand's tin mine tailings. And of course, what they were really buying was ilmenite, which is a core resource component, and you do use it to this day manufacture titanium tetrachloride. And it is still very good in creating a very efficacious smokescreen for battleships. Basically, if it hits water, it fumes, and you can do all sorts of things with it. So I thought that was very clever. The Japanese pre-war intelligence was so vastly superior to everyone else's. A silver lining, I guess. Now, if we bear this regional scenario in mind, the shifting scenario, shall I say, and how SOE was continually showing how good it was going overseas in battlefronts closer to Britain, perhaps if Britain wanted to maintain its exclusive access to tin, particularly in southern Thailand, it might have to adopt a similar type of thing to do, because the major sticky points, of course, was that British Malaya was pretty much defenceless. It had no offensive capabilities whatsoever. It knew that there was not going to be any reinforcements coming soon from London. There was going to be no new aircraft, battleships, no troops coming. There was no regular soldiers available. There was no training going on, let alone, let's not even bother talking about advanced weapons or ammunition or anything else like that. British Malaya was very much on its own. There's no two ways about that. So one of the big things they put forward was something called Operation Matador, and that came about mid-1941. And it was a bit of a combination of a conventional warfighting strategy, i.e. using whatever British military forces were here, alongside a non-conventional or irregular warfighting strategy, which was the SOE implication. The planning for Matador was that you'd have all these little units doing all this mosquito zapping in southern Thailand, paving the way for the British military to come in advance if they had to, and go over the border, stop the Japanese on the border, that kind of thing. You can see the planning that's going into that, of course, stopping enemy incursion before they get to British Malaya. And that was actually one of the other major things they'd learned after the fall of France and the implication of SOE into France, particularly southern France actually, where it would have been more beneficial if they'd had units, organisations, teams already in place, already armed behind enemy lines, before it got out of hand. So I think the planning there for Matador was that they'd have the SOE operatives already in southern Thailand, they'd had them trained, they'd had them armed, and so if the Japanese did invade, they'd be ready to go. Kind of, the closing the barn door after the horse has bolted kind of thing. So you can see where that's happening. But of course, British Malaya had no troops or anything to spare. Where on earth were they going to get all these hordes of people to come and join the SOE Far East and become operatives and do this and do that? Great planning on paper, but there was a bit of an upside to it. And I don't know whether it came from Churchill, somebody in the War Office. I think it even came from Fleming, Commander Ian Fleming of James Bond fame. He was actually was doing quite a bit of this SOE planning at the time. And they were looking at, well, how are we going to get bodies on the ground? Well, one of the biggest things British Malaya had in or going for it actually, in a positive way, was because of all the tin miners in southern Thailand, because tin mining was a protected profession. If you were a tin miner, a tin mining accountant, a tin mining engineer, anything associated with tin mining, you would not be given leave to join the military forces. So you can imagine how many men were champing at the bit to do their, go and take the fight to the enemy. There was actually nearly 100 European, Eurasian and other nationality tin miners spread up and down southern Thailand. So that was a pretty big fighting force they could call upon, and they did get leave to approach them and say, yes, we know you're in a protected profession, but how's about if you come and do SOE training and you're already there? And of course, it really worked. It went in British Malaya's favour that they could actually access recruits who were already there. And that was a huge boost for SOE. Now, the reality was that because of this SOE Far East, Churchill had pushed and they'd sent them down to Singapore. So in early 1941 in Singapore, the SOE Far East was established. It was called the Oriental Mission. It was headed up by a chap called Valentine Hillary. And he was a World War I vet, and he was a former head of ICI, International Chemical Industries, and he's a bit of an old China hand. So he's down in Singapore trying to set all this SOE Far East stuff up with a focus on southern Thailand. Now, the tyranny of distance was so huge. And you can imagine, back in 1941, you just can't pick the telephone up and call anybody. There's negligible public transport. You can't jump on a plane. You can't do this, you can't do that. The reality was Hillary was a very smart man, and he knew that he had to get some sort of advanced headquarters closer to southern Thailand. And he approached the Thai Tin Mining Company, and their equivalent of the head of mission was a chap by the name of Thomas Weir, and his headquarters are on the left there, Birch House in Penang. It still stands, it's heritage listed. And unfortunately now it's actually a Macca's. So if those walls could talk, you can imagine what you might hear. And on the right side is the old Eastern Tin Smelting Factory area, which was far from prying eyes, which was a good spot to go and teach some of these chaps who were planning on recruiting, unarmed combat, demolitions, all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. The SOE factory now is just masses of high-rise apartments. I'm sure you'll all be shocked to hear that. Now, once these advanced headquarters were in place, and again, these have been left off the history books, but they were there, they're real, and they did a very good job in getting the tin miners organised, administrated, recruited, and all that kind of thing. And I just want to put this up for you to show you that this is some of the stuff I found buried deep below all sorts of stuff. It is just the planning outline, the memo example, and you probably can't see it on the left there, but the main gist is on the right. So by August 41, they got the official go-ahead. Make it so, get in there, sort it out, Killary, do your stuff. And they had the three main things, and it was the deny British tin mines to the enemy, disrupt the enemy using any of the tin mining machinery, which actually meant not destroying it, because when the British came back, they would need the tin mines, of course, to make their own tin. So the goal was to disable them and disrupt them as much as possible, not destroy them. And of course, the main end goal was to slow any enemy tin production as much as possible. So that they were fairly self-evident, I think, from what they were trying to do. And of course now, once Killary's got this in place, and it's he's got the go-ahead, it's talent scouting, it's recruiting, it's identifying, and so on. And as I said, he's got up to 100 personnel roaming around southern Thailand on tin mines that they can tap into. And I do go into the book certain operations, covert operations, that certain scouts have gone to identify people, and various aspects of how some worked and others didn't. But let's move on. Oh, I thought you'd like to see this actually. This is the allocated code name. Quite often we hear about all these operations and things, but we don't actually see how they're allocated. And you'll note that it was given the code name on the 12th of December, 4 days after the Japanese invaded. But they were still working on this. Operation Cleeves was actually what they were working on. They didn't have the official piece of paper to say, guess what, you're officially called Cleeves. We all know how government bureaucracy runs slow. But I thought that would be interesting. And again, we were talking about the multicultural side, and this just gives you an example of how multicultural tin mining was. And it comes across over and over again, and certainly in the research, particularly in some of the outcomes of the covert operations. Things like when they were smuggling illegal weapons from Penang and SOE into southern Thailand, and they'd jury-rigged all sorts of different weird and wonderful things in cars and trucks, and apparently they would be hiding things in oil barrels because people didn't want to get dirty going to oil barrels in the middle of the hot sun. So you can understand that. They were very good, shall we say, at coming up with some creative ways of smuggling weapons and all sorts of explosives across the border. But again, I digress. So, having said that, with the multiculturalism and all the men they've identified, this is a table, and I've identified 29 of them. I've found 29 of them at the time of writing. And I've put the table, a few tables in the book, and there's a few names on here that I thought would be interesting to talk about, to give you an idea of the eclectic mix. Now, it took me quite some time, nearly several years, many years, but I did find their SOE numbers, as you can see there. I found their real names. I found some of their code names, not everybody's. Their field ranks. Now, a field rank is if you're a civilian and you're in some sort of operation or activity, you can be given a field rank by a commanding officer or a senior military officer of some rank. I found some where they were recruited, and the miscellaneous is what I know so far about them. Now, bearing in mind, this is not a definitive at all, anyway. This is just the beginning, it is a start. And the hope is that other people will go, okay, we've got this beginning, let's move on. So I need to really emphasise this is not definitive, it is a start. So if we look at some of the names on here, that Thomas Weir chap I spoke to you about, 02500, codename Tommy, acting captain, general list, again that's sort of a field rank. He was recruited in Malaya. And as I said, the manager, Thai Tin Syndicate, SOE and Birch House, he actually got out just ahead of the Japanese and made it north to the Burma border. And he drowned, and I haven't been able to work out how he drowned, whether he was on a vessel that was escaping, but needless to say, if it wasn't for him, there wouldn't be an advanced headquarters, there would not be an SOE Far East in the north. And the other chap I want to point out is the chap 2605, Wright ES. And you can see his details there. He was an interesting chap because he was actually a highly professional trained soldier, especially in covert wireless work. He'd trained with Freddie Spencer Chapman, Mad Mike Calvert, all the usual suspects in the commando world, the early days of the commando world, Special Forces world. And he'd actually been part of the first contingent that trained Australia's first independent commando company in Wilson's Promontory down in Victoria, Australia. After that, they were sent to Singapore, where they set up, again with Killary, to set up the Oriental Mission and the training courses there. And then he subsequently was sent to Penang with a few of the others for the same role. In Penang, what's interesting, I found that sometime in November he'd been identified and sent up to one of the tin mines in southern Thailand undercover. He was there as a covert operative. And one of the things that's interesting that throughout his time in southern Thailand, nobody knew that he was a covert operative, but he must have trained some of them, so I'm not quite sure how that worked out, but anyway. He was eventually arrested by the Japanese. He was in a pretty bad condition. He was taken into a civilian internee camp in Bangkok, nursed back to care, and he actually stayed in for the rest of the war as a civilian internee in a civilian internment camp. Because, of course, if the Japanese had found out he was not a civilian, he would have been interrogated, tortured and executed. But he did manage to keep his cover intact, and he didn't break his cover till he was back safely in London, which I think tells you something about the man. The other point of name on there is a chap called Thomas, Harding John Thomas. Thomas is the surname, 02705. And you can see his details there. He's the chap on the front cover of the book. His grandson was hoping to come today, but he couldn't get away from work. He was with me in Penang a couple of weeks back, and we did this together. But we're hoping that next time maybe we can get him to Bangkok. But his grandfather was one of those who was executed in something called the Kampong To massacre on the 12th of December 1941. And what had happened was the Japanese had been rounding up all sorts of people and had thrown them into a bungalow on one of the tin mining sites. And this included housewives, teenagers, SOE operatives, rubber plantation managers, all sorts of people. And eventually that included some very, very badly injured Punjabi soldiers. On the 12th of December, as I stated, the Japanese machine gunned a lot of them, came in with bayonets and all sorts of things. So he was one of the few that didn't make it out. And I do cover the massacre in detail in the book. I leave a lot of the gruesome details out, of course, though. Now we've got all the things of the, how it's going to be done. We've got the bodies on the ground to do it. Now it was up to MI2, which is Military Geographic Intelligence, to go out to southern Thailand and see what they could find. And this is what they came back with. Now this was done, I don't know by whom, but it was done sometime in 1941, and it is a terrain study. And remember I said earlier about communications, transport and supply being really important? Well, this is the transport side, and it shows you just how important southern Thailand was in all sorts of warfighting things. The red line down the middle is the Bangkok to Singapore Railway, and the two black lines at the bottom there are the only two navigable roads in southern Thailand from east coast southern Thailand to British Malaya. So you can see why that was really important in those kind of things. And it also gives you a bit of an insight, which I'll put on there in a tick, to show you what tin mines were going to be identified and where, and what taskings, what mission objectives they would be given. And so if we just kind of bear that in mind, and you'll have to excuse my paltry attempts at graphics, But I kind of put a mock-up for you just to go a bit further on that. Now, line A was the line delineated by the War Office and called the Singora line eventually. And that was the halfway mark, if you like, between where Operation Cleeves was going to be operating. One side was Singora line north, and you can see it goes all the way up to Phuket, Krabi, and all that area in between. And Singora line south, which went all the way down to Tanjong Mas, and it's not on the map there, but it goes down to Batong and all the way down there. And that, again, gives you another visual insight. This is actually where Operation Cleeves was meant to be working. Singora line north, Singora line south. So that's a bit of a visual graphic. And here's a closer view. This is the one up for Singora line north. Now, where I've got Renong ×1, that's how many dedicated Operation Cleeves operatives were there that I've identified so far. I'm sure there'll be more. Eventually we'll find more. But and if anybody can help me, there's a Bandaland tin mine area which I've never been able to find. So if anybody knows the geography down there, it'd be terrific to know where it is. But again, here we see this all these important things. You can see how all the tin mines are located so close to the railway line. And it tells you why those particular tin mines were tasked with their main things, which was not only disabling their tin mines, but everything to do with the railways north of Had Yai. Now, Had Yai was the main railway hub between the north and the south, so anybody going to Singapore had to change trains there and all that kind of thing. All sorts of differences with gauges, which I won't go into here, but it was rather interesting to read up on. And it does tell you a lot of these particular mines. Huey Moot, Rompibon had 12, and that was a very large mine, and that was the lead cell. And the chap there, a chap named Parsons, was supposed to be directing everybody. And it all, again, you can see all in yellow is to do with destroying as much of the railway line if they had to. Now, this is this Had Yai railway hub, and it is 1941 this is taken. And again, this is the Rompibon, the big one, the 12-man cell. And this, as you can see, just read there some of the stuff they've had to do, which included, Raja derailing tunnels, collapsing embankments. I mean, none of these are easy things to do. And you've got to remember these chaps are also still working in their day jobs as tin miners. So it's not something that they can just down tools and go and train. Indeed, Shenton Thomas disliked it so much because he thought they were just playing silly little jungle games, is what he called it. But as we can see, so you can see everything to do with trains, with Singora line north, and pretty self-evident, I think, because of geolocation of everybody. Now, the same applied to the south, but this is a little bit different because it's got the two main highways, and it's the closest. Singora line south is the closest to the Thai-Malay border. And they seem to have less down there. And so there's that Ban Prue where the tin mine tailings I was telling you about, that's where it was roughly located. And the Pinyock 6 is the lead cell. And again, they had some rather different ones because they were not only about disabling their tin mines, they weren't to really destroy anything at the time, but their focus was on controlling the two roads and the river, the Patani River. And the goal was not to destroy either of the access to those because they were told the British military would be using them when they were coming soon, just soon, around the corner. Now, this again is another glimpse into the primary cell for Pinyock, just one example. And again, this is a 6-man cell that's responsible for that area I showed you. So, comms blackout, I don't know how they were supposed to manage that. Commandeer all civilian transport, literally all civilian transport they were to commandeer. Control all the ferry crossings, ready the river bridges, but they weren't to blow the bridges. They were only to be blown if the Japanese got there ahead of the British military, which means they would have to hang around when the Japanese military arrived to blow them. You get the picture. And interesting, they were to control the only wireless telegraph station in southern Thailand, in that part of the region anyway, was at Tanakom, which was a penal settlement. And Tanakom had been built for the overflow of Bangkok's prisons. It was a fairly new building too, but wasn't any of the old ones by any shape or means. So that gives you a little indication how the two differences between the two different places. Now, this is the weekend before Japan invaded. gives you a little bit of indication. The big, thick, yellow squiggly thing is the Thai Malay border. The blue squares are where the two British divisions, the 11th India Division, split in two, and I've written that on there, as you can see. The red dots are where some of the Operation Cleeves operating areas were, and this, of course, is Singora Line South. And the black dots are where the Japanese had bought all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and for at least 2 years, the Japanese have been buying up disused tin mines, run-down rubber plantations, anything of that nature they'd actually been buying up, and curiously had not been reworking them or building them, but had maintained full Japanese staff, which again comes back to the pre-war Japanese intelligence that was pretty much ignored by all and sundry. But it does give you an indication of where everybody was on the weekend. And of course, it all becomes moot points. This again is from 1941. It is Singora Beach. It is where, according to beach intelligence, was the best place that the Japanese would be landing. So, and the point about this is that in terms of beach intelligence, it's a pretty solid beach. And Sakai Detachment was the landing site, and he was Major Sakai was leading the mechanised cavalry. And you can see why they would have to come in there with these proper kind of substantial beach places that the barges could come in and bring in the tanks and bring in the heavy-duty trucks and all the rest of it. You can see why, obviously. And this is one of the reasons Singora Beach was chosen, because it was wide and open and there were absolutely no defences. The other point of context, though, the Japanese weren't having it their own way. Don't get me wrong. When they did land in Singora, there was a Japanese unit on the other side of town who were giving their own, but they were pretty much overrun, because you imagine the Sakai Detachment, he's got tanks, he's got heavy-duty artillery, he's got all sorts of wonderful weaponry, and completely took everybody surprised. And we have to remember, this is 1941 Southern Thailand. So it's not like they've got a huge armoury to call from or people to call for backup, miles away. And again, this is Singora Sakai Detachment. You can see why he wanted to go there, because look at the roads, the heavy-duty roads. They're all weather access. And remember tin was going up and down these roads, trucks full of tin, taking them to Hadyai railway station to get them on trains to get them out, and getting them to the port to get them on vessels to get the tin out, and which meant if these roads could carry heavy-duty tin trucks, then they could carry heavy-duty tanks, and that's one of the biggest things when you're considering transport in fighting war. Now again, another shoddy graphic from me, but this is how in just over 24 hours, the Sakai Detachment actually moved. This is their area of operations. They'd pushed back the British troops back over the Malay border by the night of the 9th of December. And I've tracked the first downed Allied aircrew locations. I've actually got those. I've found some of the known civilian prisoner executions. The first ones were in Sadao. And I found some of the first military POW executions, which were on Singora Beach. So pretty gruesome all in all, but you can see how in just not even 48 hours, the mechanised cavalry detachment just went zoom straight through. It was like a blitzkrieg effect, just as Germany had done. So it's quite daunting when you realise that they controlled Hadyai by lunchtime on the 8th of December, the day they landed. They controlled the railway hub. And there was not much the British could do. They were outmanned, they were outgunned. They had to leave. The attrition rate was appalling. And I just want you to bear in mind this thing about Sadao with the civilian prisoner executions, because that will come into bearing shortly. Now, again, this is another little pretty one. It's Patani, 1941. Very picturesque, but it's not as nice as it looks in real world on that day, because this is where the Ando Detachment landed. The Ando Detachment was known as the Distinction Division in the Japanese Imperial Army. They were battle-hardened veterans. They were special forces and commando trained. They'd been training for months in jungle warfare in Hainan Island and in Vichy, French Indochina. These are men who'd been fighting against the Chinese for some time. These were the men who went through the Great Wall of China, and I mean literally broke the Great Wall of China down and went through it. These were men, many of them, who'd just come from Nanjing. So you can imagine the calibre of fighting soldier we're talking about in the aftermath of the Nanjing rapes and massacres. So these are the men that have landed in Patani, and they immediately started making their way inland as well. And the reason they wanted Patani, but look at the mouth of the river, this again, same time, 1941, easily could get any barges in and out there. And of course, there was a big thing too, because the Patani River went all the way into British Northern Malaya, so you could just float anything down there in those days with the tributaries. And I think that gives you a little bit of an indication how Japan had really done their homework on southern Thailand, completely. Now, this is I'm going to give you a quick reading, and we've been talking about Ban Pru, but I'd like to read you this from a chap called T.B. Snow, and it's what he did on hearing the Japanese was outside the tin mine. On hearing how close the Japanese were, Bentley and Tabbers, these were the two tin mining accountants and head of the Ban Pru mine, had made the decision to release the non-European mine staff. The plan was to head to Sadao and cross over the border to Malaya as quickly as possible. The three had asked Snow to join them, but he'd chosen to stay behind. His reasoning was that, as a Eurasian with extensive local knowledge, he'd be better placed to evade the Japanese if and when they came. So not long after Bentley and Tabbers had driven out, sure enough, a unit of Japanese soldiers pulled up close to the mine. They probably paid little attention to the half-naked man, wearing a sarong, who was barefoot, and sauntering along on the opposite side of the road. As Snow continued walking away from the tin mine and in the opposite direction of the soldiers, he was confident he'd managed to destroy at least a couple of the mechanical bits that would stop the dredgers, and he was secure in the knowledge that he'd already thrown the offending parts deep into the dense jungle undergrowth. At least Ban Pru Tin Mines dredge would not be working again for any time soon. And I put that in mind as we were talking about, I found the two civilian executions in Sadao. They were Bentley and Tabbers. I found their coronial records. So the two chaps had got out, were driving to the border, got arrested by the Japanese and were executed out the back of the police cells and left in rather awful circumstances. So it puts it more poignantly when you have names with these actions and all sorts of things. Now, Singora Line South, here's another thing, another of my paltry little infographics. Tells you a little bit more too about, we're talking about Ando detachment. These are special forces, they are really trained hard men. And this is where most of the mass civilian roundups were happening of all sorts of people, shape and form. And you can see where I've got this stripy red and white. It was a very bloody hand-to-hand, close-quarter combat engagement between these Japanese soldiers and these very brave men from the 11th Division, the Punjabi regiments that were down there. It's interesting to note, this is when I spoke earlier about the stories coming, how there were hundreds and hundreds of Thai policemen engaging with these British military soldiers down there. Well, the reports I read from the commanding officers say the exact opposite. They said they were engaging with people wearing Thai police uniforms, but the Thai police uniforms were brand new. They had shiny brass buttons. They all spoke Japanese. They all carried Japanese weapons, and they were all using Japanese warfighting tactics. And not only that, they were using jungle guerrilla tactics, and by that I mean certain specialities, for example, treetop sniping. There are certain things that jungle fighting commandos do very well, and that's some of them. But this is also the area, and I spoke about the Kampong To massacre. This is where the Kampong To massacre occurred as well. So just very close to the Thai Malaysia border down the south there. The arrows have moved since we've put the thing on here. I'm not sure what's happened. My apologies. But you get the gist of what I'm on about anyway. Now, this is another reading I want to do for you, and it's about unlucky escape, and it's about a 19-year-old girl. She was a tin mine stenographer at the Kampong Toe tin mine. She was there with her dad, who was working there, and her mother, who was a housewife. They were all living in the compound. And the other one that is part of the same story is an Australian chap named Harold McFarlane. And I just want to read to you how it was that they managed to actually survive the war. This has happened just before Christmas Day, and both McFarlane and Maureen survived the Kampong Toe massacre, very badly injured. They were found by Thai locals. They were taken to the local Thai police, and this is what's been happening in the interim. Over the next few days, both McFarlane and Maureen remained under Thai police custody until around Christmas Day, when they were both hidden under fruit and vegetables in the back of a local Thai market lorry and taken inside Tanacom. McFarlane was put into general population. Maureen was left in the care of the superintendent's wife and other women. Now that's a smart move, because for some reason the Japanese were terrified of the penal settlement, and putting McFarlane into the main population. The Japanese had nothing, they never went there. That's another story entirely. A few days later, after the Japanese had left, McFarlane and quite a few of the other Europeans who'd been hidden in there were driven to the makeshift Thai police holding cell near Yala. Now this is Yala town about 1940, so I don't think this would be any vastly different to 1941. And I'm not sure if that's a makeshift police hut down there, but what was happening is that the Thai police were popping up all these little huts all over the place, not where you'd expect them to be, in jungle clearings, and they were taking Europeans and anybody injured or anybody fleeing from the Japanese into these makeshift police cells. Now on this night, after they got back to Yala and they were in the hut, several armed Japanese arrived unannounced, and they immediately began a heated argument with the Thai police chief. Nobody could really understand what was going on, but sometime later it seemed Maureen, McFarlane and all the other prisoners were heading to Yala train station to head forward to Had Yai, train's hub, under police guard. From there they were told they were going to be travelling by train to Bangkok, and they weren't alone. Accompanying them was the governor of Yala, along with his wife and daughter, and several other higher-ranking Thai police and their families. A close watch was kept on all the girls and women who it didn't matter what nationality they were. On each of the 3 stops along the way to Bangkok, the governor and the Thai police were confronted by Japanese soldiers who continued demanding the Europeans be handed over. But the Thai officials had somehow managed to acquire an official-looking piece of paper, giving them both Japanese permission and authority to take the prisoners to Bangkok. From there, they were to be taken to a Thai-run civilian internee camp somewhere near the capital, and indeed that's what happened. Maureen Magnus and Harold McFarlane, amongst others, who had been involved with Operation Cleeves, were in Prachan civilian internee camp until the end of the war. And luckily for them, if it hadn't been for that particular governor and that police chief, we would probably never know about this. So this is just some very quick takeaways, just to give you an idea, that Southern Thailand bore the initial brunt of Japanese atrocities. They were not regular troops, these Japanese troops. I have identified 29 Operation Cleeves operatives. Shows you there, I found a third died roughly. A third fate we don't know. And it pretty much tells you everything else. There is no plaque or monument commemorating any of them yet. I say yet. We're working on that. And thank you for letting me know, by the way, that I had no idea, but this is where the book apparently is now available. So thank you all so much for listening. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. When you were present about Songkhla or Singora, now I'm conducting some project about push Songkhla to be the World Heritage. So your information wonderful for me to more understand about Songkhla province. Anyone have a question? We have time around 10 minutes for the question.
Yeah, very interesting subject. When you talk about the Japanese, they are not regular troops. What were they?
They were special forces trained, commando troops, jungle warfare trained. These are not the same as a normal soldier who joins the military, goes to infantry, goes to training, learns to shoot a gun, learns to take orders.
So where were they trained?
They were trained in Hainan Island. They were trained in the Vichy French jungles, and they were trained at sea. They did a lot of commando training at sea off the coast of what is now Vietnam.
It's many years before the war? They were planning it for so long, or what?
No, they started their training about 1940 because they were using China as a bit of a training ground, and quite often off the coast of China they were using a lot of their tactics, honing their tactics, I should say. Yeah.
Anyone have another question?
The source of your materials, obviously it was places where you could read, you could probably written in English most of the...
No, I read I speak 9 languages.
Okay.
So a lot of the stuff is original documentation, archival, eyewitness accounts, hence why I could get into the Malay, the Thai, the Chinese, and all those kind of things, because it's important we get other people's eyewitness accounts. And one of the most telling things was during the War Crimes Commissions post-war, that so many of these eyewitness statements were just discarded because they weren't European.
I'm just wondering whether there's a depth of Thai material, the stories of the governor and the people that did all these particular things. Are you aware of, or maybe the historian could tell us as to whether there is a significant amount of Thai material that hasn't been looked at, which gives input to what happened in that part of the world at this time?
Not really. A lot of the eyewitness statements from those accounts have come from the survivors and English language speaking survivors, and a lot of Eurasians spoke English, so a lot of the time the eyewitness testimonies. From the Thai side, a lot of them, I've had trouble finding the original Thai or the original Malay or Chinese indeed, which was very frustrating because quite often you'd have the interpreter's copy, but unless you've got the original language that was used, quite often it gets lost in translation and the context doesn't work. Yeah, but negligible to do with World War II in Thai archives that I could find. I don't know about, especially.
I think about now there in like a Songkhla province, many people can remember the story about the Japanese and American operation in the area. So there are like a lot of story, but the difficult thing is like how to make sure that memory is correct.
That's why the statements I used are from 1945 to 1947.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
You mentioned the Japanese had good knowledge of Thailand, the waterways, the roads, the infrastructure, that type of thing.
Yep.
Was that done like well before
Yep.
these operations? And just wanted your thoughts on that.
Japanese intelligence was doing pre-war gathering from roughly about 1936 onwards. Actually, one of the major staff officers involved was part of Ando's detachment when they landed, and he was helping him along the way, shall we say. He was. I do describe him and write about him in the book, and about how the Japanese pre-war intelligence gathering was second to none. They were very good about what they did, very good. Not only in terms of geography and terrain, but certainly by November 1941, for example, all of the Japanese population in most of British Malaya had fled into southern Thailand. So there was quite substantial movements going on, and it was just dismissed, you know. Japanese owned all the photographic shops, they owned this, they owned that, and they actually have intelligence reports from Singapore in 1940 and 1941 where they've written, the Japanese were watching us build this armament next to Singapore, Fortress Singapore, and they thought it was funny. So you can see that cultural context of white man sit up front. Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened to the mine? Sorry, I'm sorry. What happened to the mines after the mining engineers and so on were removed from the mines? I mean, did the Japanese continue producing tin?
Some they did, yes. Some they couldn't. They were far technologically advanced to what the West had at the time. And a lot of the tin mines didn't come up to par with what they were thought they could do. So a bit of overconfidence there. Some of them went into disrepair. And of course they couldn't maintain the standards because by this time they'd pushed down to Singapore. And their idea was, the machinery will look after itself, it'll be all right, it'll keep going. And of course it didn't, especially those that are close to the coast. Salt water gets into all sorts of tin mines and all sorts of things. You can imagine the damage to the vehicles. And because they'd commandeered nearly all the ships and all the lorries and everything else, getting the tin out, what could they do with it? There was only 3 smelting companies. 2 were in Penang, 1 was in Singapore. And the Japanese had forgotten to leave heavy-duty trucks and lorries behind to ship the iron ore to get it to smelting places, to get it into ingots. So there was a little short-sightedness in a lot of the Japanese planning. For example, another example is that they hadn't planned for civilian prisoners of war. They didn't know what to do with them. So it was great intelligence, pre-war gathering and all this kind of thing, but when it came to the nitty-gritty, the little things that mean something didn't work. And it was indeed, took I think about 2-3 years after the war ended that the tin mines did get back up and running, but that, again, they were back in the hands of British and indeed Australians. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for an very interesting talk. What do you attribute, why was there such, before the operation and before the invasion of Malaya, and indeed Indochina, why was there such a complete failure of intelligence about what the Japanese were doing? I mean, the Americans had embargoed the Japanese after their invasion, as I understand it, of Indochina. And it was obvious that's where all the resources were. I mean, all the way in Malaya with the rubber, as well as Thailand with the tin, and then Indonesia with all of the oil and so on, the resources there. Yep. Well, why was this a complete surprise? And what else could, perhaps counterfactually, could the British have done? And then a final question, a little bit controversial. I'm sorry, I'm going on a bit. Do you see any analogy with the complacency that a lot of people are regarding China's build-up of its ownership of a lot of the natural resources in this part of the world? And I appreciate if you say you're a historian, that's not a question you need to address, but if you do have anything to say about it, I'd be interested to hear. Wow,
not a loaded question at all. Oh dear. On the first part of the question, there were reporting across the board. Several people within Southern Thailand were continually sending reports down to Singapore, down to what was the security agency responsible for intelligence gathering. And it was just being dismissed out of hand because it wasn't coming through British military channels. And again, it comes back to conventional warfare, regular warfare. They could not see outside the box. And this was pretty much Brooke Popham and Percival and Thomas. They couldn't, if it was outside the box, it wasn't correlating. Because it didn't come through official military channels, it was dismissed outright. And we're talking about doctors and dentists and professional men and women and businessmen reporting over and over again. And a lot of it was discounted because some of them were Eurasian. So it was taken, that can't possibly be there. So that gives you an indication that there was intelligence coming down, but it was being discounted because of that reason. On the other side, there was no MI6 or MI5 here, or the equivalents thereof. So that was the other problem. There was no tertiary intelligence reporting place at all other than the defence security, which was pretty lax and useless, to be quite honest, at that time. As to the second part of the question with China and resources, I think we have to be careful when we're placing too much of that into the context of now, because it's something that the Europeans did with the scramble for Africa. And it's been going on for centuries, perhaps even since Westphalia, for example. So I think we have to be careful because we are no longer in a Western century. And I think the West is having real difficulties in coming to the concept that the West is no longer king, and we have to embrace vast other cultures and vast multicultural cultures. So I think that's the thing, that's one of the biggest problems. And we can stand and point fingers just as much as we can point fingers at the Americans for invading Hawaii or owning all the islands off the coast of South America and using them for experimentations as we speak. So we have to be careful, and I think in due course and in due time, as all good historians, we'll wait and see. Yes.
I have a question about the tin mines. In Malaya, obviously, they were run, probably owned and run by the British. But Southern Thailand, it seems from what I understand that there were foreigners working there. Didn't Thai own these mines?
No, the British own them.
They owned the Thai mines?
Yeah.
Really?
Yep, all of them.
All of them? The same companies as in Malaya?
Yep.
Interesting.
Oh, actually, there was one or two Australian mines companies too, but the majority were British, and they were all the same tin mining company.
And they owned it as well. How interesting.
Correct. Yeah.
Are the mines still there? All the remains of them?
Well, this is where I've been trying to identify them. Some of them are still working. Pinyock is still working, for example. Kampong Toe tin mine, where the massacre has been erased off the ground, which is unfortunate because that's still a mass grave site. There's still 12 souls there, 12 hungry ghosts running around. There's a lot of places that have just disappeared off the map. Some are still working. Again, it's that trying to correlate the maps from those years with what we have now, and because not having Google Earth back then makes it a little bit different. But it's a good point, and it's something several people have been trying to ascertain, especially families I've dealt with who've given me access to some of their family records. I mean, the chap on the cover there, his grandson didn't even know he was an SOE operative. I had to inform several of the families this is what Granddad did, because they didn't know. So it's hard, because they're trying to trace where their forebears were in the tin mines, and the tin mines are gone. So, yeah, difficult.
Okay, the last question? It's okay.
On the tin mines, what happened post-war to the ownership of those tin mines?
Same companies.
Oh, they
stayed within
retained
British and Australian hands, yeah.
Okay.
Some still are, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. On behalf of the SAM Society, I would like to thank Kate that present your like a wonderful books, and also like a presentation.
Oh, thank you.
And also, I love your all answers. It's like really positive in some answer. Oh, okay. We have like some souvenir for you.
Oh, thank you.
To be our like a thank you.